best to start linear. Before I even go any further, these are my opinion. You can share your opinions down in the comments if you like. But starting with the layout, I feel like it's best to start off linear, you know, give them a very strict path. And then when the time feels right, separate the path, but very also linear and very structured. Now you can separate the routes, which I'll get to more in a second. But again, for my new people, I say stick to one layout or stick to one route and, you know, go from there to make it easier on you. For routes, personally, I like to keep a very structured and organized one-way route, if that makes sense. It helps remember the layout easier, and it helps just for the newer. I like to make my zones playable for everyone, if that makes sense. Search between top route and bottom route if you want. These are mainly for the failed jumps, but again, that might make your zone a little bit harder to remember. You don't want your, you know, the player playing your level to get lost a lot of times. You know what I'm saying? So you can do it, but it's kind of hard to replicate. For me personally, as you can see, once I start with the top route, I let it be its own route. And then towards the end, somewhere in the end, hold on, this zone is long. Towards the end, you would like to merge the bottom route. Again, this is how I make my zone. So if you are interested in doing something like that, that's cool. But if not, you can always merge it through the between from failed jumps or whatever. I also think it's best to stick with the layout first, stick with the chunks first. And then once you feel like your zone is completely finished, it feels right. Yes, it's going to feel plain at first, but feels right. Then add the decoration chunks and enemies, rings, arrows, whatever you need. I feel like that's a very organized and good way to start your zone. I would like to explain decoration chunks. Some of the decoration chunks do not look right. So it's best to make an area of just decoration chunks just to see if they look right with the zone. You know, some don't, some do. For the advanced people on Classic Sonic Simulator, sometimes they make advanced decorations from the objects. So, you know, it really improvise. Use your brain on these. Okay, for enemy placement, if it's an easy zone, minimum enemies. If it's a medium zone, a reasonable amount of enemies. Most of my zones are reasonable. You know what I'm saying? They're not too close, but they're close. You know what I'm saying? For hard zones, do not load the player with freaking enemies in their face. That's not hard. That's ridiculous. Have a reasonable enemy placement space. You know what I'm saying? It helps give the player enough time to react. Not to mention, if you're adding decoration chunks, they will also like to look at the foreground, the background, and all that. They're not going to be paying attention to enemies most of the time. Enemies don't need to be put everywhere. I want that to be right off the bat. They don't need to be put everywhere. They just need to be put at a reasonable spot. You know what I'm saying? That feels like enemies should be put there. I'm just now getting into using obstacles, which are mainly the spikes and the spike balls. I don't really use them. I don't have a reason to. They're just there. But I'm starting to get adjust to using them. And I suggest that they have their own separate section. Do not involve enemies with obstacles. I just don't feel like that's right at all. It's really too much to pay attention to, not to mention most of the obstacles on here are like moving platforms. You can keep them still, but that's kind of plain and you don't know where to really put them in. So I really recommend having an obstacle section because, you know, why not? Speed and platforming sections. I really feel like you should separate them. Don't ever, if I'm going fast, don't put an enemy in my face. Why are you doing that? Personally, me, if you're going fast, let them go fast until you see a ramp or something that keeps them at a halt, and then put enemies in their face. You know what I'm saying? Because it just makes it feel organized. You always want your zone to feel organized. You don't want to hop in the zone and be like, yo, why is Green Hill in Hydro City? Like I said, I'm starting to use obstacles. So even give it an obstacle section. You can involve it in platforming sections because, again, it's just jumping. But if you want to add some obstacles and jumping, fine by me. I don't never put enemies right in front of your face while you're going fast because why should you? You can maybe put it in obstacle sections, but I feel like, again, that's more for the hard zones. But if you're going fast and someone just puts an enemy in your face, that's kind of wild. Not everybody rolls in the game. For OST, I try to go with the name. You know, this zone is called Lunar Station, and I was trying to look for something that feels like lunary, you know what I'm saying, with also a station vibe. And, you know, hear it for yourself. You just also want to give the player the vibe that, okay, I'm for real in a lunar station. I'm for real in the zone. You know what I'm saying? This is for real a canon zone. Again, that's how I like to make my zones feel canon. For your name, just think outside the box. It's really not that hard. You know, think of a zone that you would want, or a zone that is just out of the ordinary, but it sounds cool. You know what I'm saying? I really wanted to make a zone called Olympus Mountain. Come on now, Olympus Mountain Zone. That's fine. I personally focus more on the height than the width. Yes, I do want a long stay, so I'm always going to either do like 192 or something like 100. But for your height, I always do height first, because you never know if you want to go down or up, or, you know, because not every sonic zone is going to be lefty righties. It's either going to be going up or down, to be honest. I always try to focus more on the background, and then I go to your foreground. I always try to add the color that's not shown the mostest. I try to, I just try to fit everything together. Now for your events, we have a lot of new events in the test servers, and I really recommend, before even making a zone for events, test them out first so you can understand what the mechanics are. The easiest on here is probably only bottom bound. For the others, you really have to mess around with their RGB code. And what that means, some of them want you to change their background color or the background tint. I'll get to more of that in a separate video. With the boss fight, you have to do like a set offset point of where he's going to spawn and in this box. It's kind of weird because we don't really know what the offset is, but we'll work on it. But yeah, that's pretty much it of how I make my level design. Give them an intro. That's basically it. Give them a little intro of how the zone's finna act, and then more linearity until it meets another route. You know what I'm saying? You can go top route, bottom route. You can make 3 of these if you wanted to, but I'm not going to do that. Enemy placement, make it reasonable. As you can see, I only put 2 here. Gave them a little short speed section and then added more. It's okay. You don't need to put a bunch of enemies in their faces. For your speed sections, give them I'm learning, I do long speed sections, but if you want to, give them a short burst and then go back to platforming, because I've learned that's more fun, to be honest. Again, you can add an obstacle section. I feel like these are very underrated. People don't really do obstacle sections. They put obstacles with enemies, which is, again, insane. I don't really like that at all. Quick note, for your bottom section, you always want to make sure it's a little slower than the top section. Those bottom routes are usually obviously for the people that don't have quick time reaction, or just for the people that want to take a different route, but it's longer. But your top route is usually less platformy, but more speedy and more quicker than the bottom route.
You can click the video, you can click subscribe.